Hey guys, this week I'm going to be exploring three novellas that I read recently that I very much enjoyed. So if that is something you're interested in, stick around and listen to a novel review. Hello and welcome to the Literature Podcast, a novel review. My name is Seamus, your host, and together we will discuss, dissect, and explore the wonderful world of literature. And the wonderful world of literature is a vast and dense jungle. So let's start making our way through, one book at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of a novel review. New week, new books, same host. My name is Seamus. This is a novel review, a book podcast. And yeah, last week I did three novellas that I had recently read that I didn't really enjoy that much. But this week I'm doing three novellas that I recently read that I very much enjoyed. So kind of a nice balance there, doing three mediocre ones to three really good ones. And yeah, I'm really excited for this episode because it's always fun to talk about a multitude of books, but also books that you thoroughly enjoyed. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I guess just to quickly run through before I break them down in a bit more detail what the novellas actually are. We have J.R.R. Tolkien's Leaf by Niggle, Stefan Zweig's Burning Secret, and Claire Keegan's Foster. There it is. And yeah, three wonderful little stories. All of them, actually no, Stefan Zweig's is 120 pages. The others are all under 100 pages. All very achievable to read in one sitting. I'd also say, just like the three novellas I didn't like, all three very individualistic in that they're not very similar in any way. So I have no particular prejudice for a good book or against a good book, bad book. So yeah, three very different stories, and I'm very excited to get into them. But before I do, if you would like to like and subscribe, as always, housekeeping, please do hit the subscribe button, hit the 5-star button. I would really appreciate it. It really makes my day. So thank you so much, guys. And yeah, let's get on with the show. So let's go bottom top. Let's start with Claire Keegan's Foster. I picked this up in the bookshop a few weeks ago when I was sort of struggling reading the three novellas I wasn't enjoying. I think I was on the second one, and I was really craving a novella. I mean, as you can probably tell, I read 6 novellas in a couple of weeks. I really sort of get into a novella hotspot and just smash through quite a few. And yeah, I sort of have read 2 of them and wasn't enjoying it, and so I went to the bookshop and just saw Claire Keegan sitting there, name up in lights. And given how much I was thoroughly surprised by small things like these, which I did do an episode on, so go check out, I just saw her name and was like, yep, I have a feeling it's going to be good. I'd only ever read small things like these by Claire Keegan, so there was, I think, a bit of nervousness because I really wanted this to be as good as that. And look, how do I say this? It's definitely not as good as small things like these. I think that book is just up there in a great piece of literature. This is still an incredible piece of literature, though. Don't take anything away from this book at all. I just think small things like these was mind-blowingly wonderful. But this book itself, Foster. This was released in 2010, and it's essentially about a young girl that comes from a family that seems to be a bit dysfunctional. The mother seems to be pregnant a lot, and she's pregnant currently with another child. Doesn't actually specify how many children there are. The father seems to be a bit careless and irresponsible, I guess. You know, he's constantly getting his wife pregnant but not really supporting them, so it's that kind of irresponsibility that the father carries out. And so this particular daughter, it's not really explained why, and if it was, I completely missed it, but it's not really explained why she is going to live with this family. She's just kind of being dropped at this distant relative's family. It's a husband and wife, and she's being left there for the summer. And basically that's what the story is about. It doesn't feel like a particularly long summer, but that's probably because it's not a particularly long book. It does feel like, you know, it is summer in Ireland, and living in London, summer seems to last a few weeks. So I'd say it's probably a month. The daughter is tentative at first, I think, because she's coming from a household where she probably hasn't been particularly noticed and respected in a way that we want to notice and respect children. So coming into this new family, she's a bit kind of hesitant. She doesn't quite know what to expect. She doesn't know why she's there. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know what she's walking into. She's a child, so there's all these kind of ideas just floating around in her head. She's uncertain. She's nervous. All these things that make for a really kind of hesitant beginning. And at the start, I was quite nervous because if you've read small things like these, it delves into some pretty dark topics. And I was, quite nervous that this poor child was getting sort of put into a foster home, and that foster home was going to be terrible. Alas, the foster home ends up being fantastic. Really, really beautiful people, these two people. There's a few sort of instances that really set them up as really nice people. I've got one here that I want to touch on because I think it's an incredibly subtle and simple thing, but it happens just so often. So this is at one particular scene. They're in town shopping, and the mum, or the foster mum, is doing some shopping, and she's in a shop alone. And a woman says, "Not long till they're back at school," says the woman behind the counter. "Isn't it a great relief to have them off your back?" And this woman herself has her own children, so she's speaking from relative experience. And Mrs. Kinsella, the woman says, "This one's no trouble," Miss Kinsella says, and pays for the card along with some sheets of notepaper and a packet of envelopes. "It's only missing her I'll be when she is gone." And it's that really subtle kind of moment where you can easily, as a parent or in any kind of similar situation, just lump on and be like, "Yeah, God, I can't wait to see the back of my kids." And people do it every day, and we don't think anything of it because it's really not that bad a thing to do. But I think that just positive reinforcement of, no, I actually quite enjoy my kids. I quite enjoy spending time with them. It's actually, I'm going to be sad when they're gone. It's just that kind of little subtle, no, I'm not going to play along with your little game of, if you're not completely happy with your kids, or if you think they're a burden in some aspect of your life, I'm not going to play along to that and buy into that. And my kid isn't perfect all the time, but I thoroughly enjoy them. So it was just that subtle little moment that I really enjoyed that kind of sets up who these two individuals are, both as individuals and as a couple, and how they sort of look after this girl. I think what I'm finding with Claire Keegan's writing style, which I think is just absolutely perfect, is it's incredibly sparse, it's incredibly simple, it's incredibly brief, but it's incredibly beautiful. And she seems to have mastered so well the silences of the novel. It's more what is not said than what is said in these stories. And they just seem to get through so much so quickly. It's an incredibly dense story, but incredibly simple story as well. I mean, it just brings complete beauty to the mundane, and that's sort of one of the best things you can do in literature and art, is just sort of bring beauty and attention to the simple mundane tasks of our everyday life and understand how important they are to the overarching story of the world. So we're getting quite deep there. On the back, David Mitchell says it's as good as Chekhov, and I think I'm beginning to agree. Before this, my favorite novella writers were Stefan Zweig, who I'm about to talk about, and Chekhov. But Claire Keegan has just smashed it. I think, it's becoming a now trio of great literature artists at the top there, and Claire Keegan's going to be occupying that spot, hopefully for a very, very long time. I know she's got a couple more books out that I have yet to read, but they're going to be on the hit list pretty soon. So that is Claire Keegan's Foster. I think I'd give that a 4.5 out of 5. It's pretty good. The next short story is Stefan Zweig's Burning Secret. I picked this up because I saw it on the shelf in a bookshop for £2, and I thought, that's crazy. What book is worth £2? On the back it says it's worth £5, so I'm saving money technically. It is a great story. It's kind of like an off-season at, I guess, what would be an all-inclusive, but it's kind of like the super wealthy people that go there. So it's kind of that really exclusive kind of ski resort without the skiing, just kind of like living in this giant manor in this giant place. And he's kind of mysterious because you never learn his name and you never learn the woman's name, but he's called the Baron, and he's always just referred to as the Baron. He gets up there, he's on holidays. He doesn't really want to be taking these holidays, he says at the start, but he's up there and pretty much he would like to be cuddling up to a woman for the week. That's sort of his intention for the week, to find a nice, agreeable woman to spend his holiday with. He manages to spy one out, the woman in question, whose name we never learn, and she's kind of not taking notice of him in a way that he thinks she should be, because he's the Baron, of course. But then he notices that she has a son who's called Edgar, and he's the only character that's named, and I think that's quite appropriate. But he then the Baron quickly realizes that the way to get to the woman's heart is through Edgar. So he befriends Edgar, and then what starts is this sort of, I don't think it's quite a week-long melee, but a week-long, or it's about 5 days long of trying to sort of playing cat and mouse, seducing, navigating certain things, and it is just this incredible story that I was not expecting it to be this good. I don't know why I doubted Stefan Zweig, but it's just the interplay of the three characters is just the perfect triangle of chaos, because there are points when all three characters are technically right and technically wrong all at the same time, and I absolutely love that. I do want to say that at the start of this book, it's it's quite... you're following the Baron, and he's trying to obviously get women, approach women, seduce women is probably the most appropriate way to say it. And it very much reads as he is a hunter trying to sort of stalk his prey. And it's a bit kind of like reading it with the modern sensibilities is a bit like, I don't know if you should be speaking like this anymore, you know? They're women, they're not lions that you're hunting, and you probably shouldn't even be hunting lions anymore. So it was a bit kind of confronting at the start for that reason, but it sort of settles down after that. But it's this wonderful kind of unspokenness between what's going on in this idea of hunting your prey, a woman. And I've got this particular scene here because as the novel progresses, the Baron gets in favor with the mother, the woman he's going after. And then obviously because of that, suddenly the son who he'd befriended originally is now in the way. And it's kind of really confusing for the son, because at the start he's like, oh my God, there's a Baron here. He wants to be friends with me and I really enjoy this. It's fantastic. It's not really specified how the relationship is with the father and the son, but suddenly it's like nice to be, I guess, have a friend in a place like this where children probably didn't have many friends because they're in a holiday house that in a holiday resort thing, and there was probably no other kids around. So to have a friend was really something he was enjoying. But then, of course, once the Baron's in favor with his mother, the son starts to be in the way. And the son starts to get really annoyed at this because he doesn't really understand what's going on, but he also thinks the Baron's up to something that is perhaps no good, which technically he is. So I'm going to read this little paragraph because I think it just perfectly captures the duality between childhood innocence and just being an adult. And the Edgar says, he's a liar. He's only pretending. He does it out of mean, horrid calculation. He wanted to get to know you. That's why he was nice to me and promised me a dog. I don't know what he promised you or why he's making up to you, but he wants something from you, Mama. You can be sure he does. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so friendly and polite. He's a bad man. He tells lies. Just look at him sometime. You'll see how he's always pretending. I hate him. He's a miserable liar. He's no good. And it's a really kind of almost humorous passage, but also kind of shocking passage, because this poor child doesn't understand that the lies that this Baron is telling is something that we as adults probably indulge in. We indulge in the fancies and fantasies of this, burning secret, this kind of courtship, to be quite proper, because that's what's going on. The mother very well knows that he's lying, that he's up to no good, and she knows very well what he's after. Sex. So it's this really kind of humorous passage where the child thinks he's doing something completely wrong, which technically on paper, lying and telling these lies is something that is technically wrong, and we raise our children not to tell lies and stuff like that. But then suddenly at some point we start indulging in those lies. We start indulging in those fantasies. And it's this wonderful duality between what you indulge in as an adult and what you don't yet understand as a child. And it's this triangle of absolute chaos that just creates this wonderful story. It's only 120 pages and it is just a chaotically wild, enjoyable ride between the innocence and death of the death of innocence for a child versus just kind of adult natures and what that actually means. So that was another wonderful book. Really surprised with this. Can't believe it was on special. Very happy it was on special. Stefan Zweig's Burning Secret. I think I would give this a 4.2 out of 5. It was pretty damn good. Okay, on to the third and final book, and it's tough. I mean, Tolkien is my favorite author, so he was always going to be here, wasn't he? It was never in question when I picked up something from him. It was always going to go in the absolutely enjoyed it pile. I picked up this Leaf by Niggle. I can't remember why I picked it up. I think I just saw Tolkien and really felt like reading some Tolkien, but I don't know. The back also just kind of sold me. Niggle as a painter, not a very successful one, partly because he has so many other things to do. That's a wonderful sentiment. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, very short story. It's essentially about this artist called Niggle, and he has this journey to take. This journey, and it's not really specified what the journey is, but he has this journey to take, but he's still got all this art to do. And he kind of frets about it, and he's not sure, and then his neighbor wants some help done, so he goes and helps his neighbor because Niggle is a very helping and kind individual. And so he feels constantly distracted, and that's kind of what the story is about until he goes on his journey. I'm going to try not to spoil any more of the story beyond telling you what the journey is. And I don't think that this is really a spoiler because, well, I'll just tell you what it is. The journey is death. Not a light topic, but the journey he has to go on is death. And I don't think that's a spoiler because Tolkien very openly spoke about sort of the inevitability of death and how, I think he says about Lord of the Rings, he talks about Lord of the Rings in an interview saying it's a human story and all human stories are concerned with one thing, death, the inevitability of death. And so I don't think that's a real big spoiler because we're all going to die at some point, and that doesn't necessarily spoil the journey of our life, which is the story. So he dies in the end. And that's not a major part of the story, at least for me it wasn't, because it was more about the journey he goes on to get to where he does at the end of the book. I wanted to read the opening paragraph just because I think it has some wonderful wits. It's got that sort of Tolkien wit, very dry kind of wit, but also I think it speaks to artists a lot, and then I'll get into a bit more of the analysis. There was once a little man called Niggle who had a long journey to make. He did not want to go. Indeed, the whole idea was distasteful to him. But he could not get out of it. He knew he would have to start sometime, but he did not hurry with his preparations. Niggle was a painter, not a very successful one, partly because he had so many other things to do. Most of these things he thought were a nuisance, but he did them fairly well when he could not get out of them, which, in his opinion, was far too often. The laws in his country were rather strict. And I just kind of love that as an opening paragraph because I think anyone who loves literature or is a painter or an artist or anything like that would immediately just understand exactly what's going on here, because Niggle was a painter, not a very successful one, partly because he had so many other things to do. And I mean, Tolkien was apparently a very big procrastinator, and it's kind of an interesting procrastination because I think it happens so often in that, you just want to get to the weekend so you can spend the time reading and writing, and then something comes up. You have to go out for drinks with a friend. You have to go to a christening, a bar mitzvah, a birthday party, to this, to that, to your uncle's birthday, your grandma, like so many other things just detract you from something you want to be doing. And that's not to say you wouldn't like to do those things because they're often quite nice things, of course. But really what you want to be doing is just sitting there, sinking your teeth into your working project, that great novel you're working on, the painting you're working on. And I really just love that because I think that just sums it up so nicely. Not a very successful one, partly because he had so many other things to do. Just captures it nicely. But basically, Niggle is working on this tree, and it's interesting because Tolkien said he didn't like allegory. And then he wrote a story like this, which was so clearly an allegory. So he's working on this tree, and every leaf he goes into this incredible painstaking detail. Every leaf is different, and every leaf is given proper respect and attention. And it's very sort of clear that one, the leaf is the Hobbit, the tree that the overarching tree is the Lord of the Rings, the world that it inhabits is Middle Earth, and that Niggle is Tolkien. So there's this very direct correlative sort of situation going on there. And then of course there's the aspect that the fact that this is a journey about death and not getting enough done before you die. And for that reason, you can read it as a very spiritual, religious story. I didn't read it like that, but that's probably just because I am not religious. So that didn't take a huge sort of That wasn't really the center of my attention when I was reading it. I was more reading it as I understood it to be, which was just this guy that's sort of passing away, and yeah, the inevitability of death and what that actually means, and how you can never sort of achieve everything you want to achieve. And that's often okay. You're never going to achieve everything you want to achieve. I really liked at the very end, there's this kind of, I think it's quite a sad passage, but I also think it's quite a beautiful passage. Now, at this point in the story, Niggle has departed this world, and the great tree artwork that he was working on has been neglected and used for other things. It was on a canvas, so it was used to cover up a hole in someone's house, because he lives in a place that doesn't particularly value art. And so when there was a huge storm and someone's house is leaking, they're like, well, why would we preserve a painting when we can use that to save the house? Very practical. But this is sort of one of the very last passages. It's the third last paragraph of the book, and it reads, "Oh, poor little Niggle," said Perkins. "Never knew he painted." That was probably the last time Niggle's name ever came up in conversation. However, Aikens preserved the old corner. Most of it crumbled, but one beautiful leaf remained intact. Aikens had it framed. Later he left it to the town museum, and for a long while, Leaf by Niggle hung there in a recess and was noticed by a few eyes. But eventually the museum was burnt down, and the Leaf and Niggle were entirely forgotten in his old country. And again, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful passage, and it just sort of alludes back to that inevitability of death. And I remember watching a show when I was younger about the sort of 3 deaths you suffer, that everyone suffers, and it's the first death is when you die as a person. Your body, your heart stops pumping blood to your body. That's your first death. The second death is when your body decays and decomposes into nothing, into dust, into the ground, into dirt for the worms to eat. And then the third death you suffer is when your name is spoken for the last time, and it's kind of this inevitability that that's going to happen. And I think it's quite a dark passage if you want to read it like that, knowing that, in 200 years, maybe even 100 years, we'll all be dead. Everyone watching this will be dead. Sorry, guys, to break it to you. And that, our lives will be, I guess, essentially meaningless in that way. But I think there's a lot of beauty in it, because it's like, well, we're alive right now. We've got so much we can do in this life. And just because we're going to die doesn't mean that our lives are meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Perhaps maybe meaningless in that 1,000 years, no one will remember our names. And that's okay, because that's going to happen. And so we should embrace that and just enjoy our lives and have a bit of fun along the way. So Leaf by Niggle by J.R.R. Tolkien was just this wonderful little story. I think it's really sort of summed up beautifully on the front here, the times. As with good all short stories, this one expands in the imagination. And I think that's exactly what happens, because, you could read it as a religious story, you could read it as a spiritual story, you could read it as an allegory, or you could just read it as this simple little story of a man going on an adventure. So that was Leaf by Niggle, J.R.R. Tolkien. This is going to get, I think, a 4.5 as well. Okay, well, that was 3 novellas that I thoroughly enjoyed reading. All of them, weekend reads, all of them one sitting. Leaf by Niggle is, I think, 40 pages. Burning Secret, 120, and Claire Keegan, 80. So 40, 80, 120. Pretty well balanced there as well. Take your pick. If you want to read one, go check out the episode of Novellas I didn't quite enjoy. That's also, I think, quite an interesting one. It's always good to talk about books you didn't like. If you've listened this far, please consider hitting those 5 stars. If you want to subscribe as well, that would be fantastic. The box should be around here somewhere down in the corner. It's a little duck. Click it. You might, something fun might happen. And thanks so much for listening, guys. It's been a great episode, so I think it's time to take us away. So today, to take us away, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's Wind, Sand and Stars, which inspired The Little Prince, and this little paragraph, the whole book is quotable, but this little paragraph about a desert horizon, and it reads, "The evening light has sobered me. I have come to a sudden halt, frightened as I sense how far I have travelled. In the twilight the mirage is dying. The horizon has stripped itself of its splendour, its palaces, its priestly vestments. It is a desert horizon."